Admiral Daniel Carter was drinking his morning coffee on Luna Base when the first reports came in. He set down his cup and stared at the screen in front of him. For a moment, he thought it was a mistake. It had to be a mistake. But it was not a mistake. 300 warships had appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. They had bypassed every early warning station. They had ignored every attempt at communication. And now, they were heading straight for Earth. "Get me a line to the Defiance," Carter said to the officer beside him. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. "And contact every ship we have in the system. I want them ready to move in 10 minutes. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Commander Lisa Monroe was already watching the sensor data. She had served under Carter for 15 years, and she had never seen anything like this. The Dominion was known throughout the galaxy as a violent and aggressive empire. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had enslaved entire species, but they had never attacked a member of the Galactic Council before. Humanity had only joined the Council 3 years ago. They were still considered newcomers, still considered primitive, still considered weak. They were about to test that theory. "Commander, the lead ships are entering weapons range of Earth," a young officer reported. His voice was trembling. "They're not responding to any of our signals." Monroe felt her stomach drop. How long until they reached the major cities? 47 minutes. She closed her eyes for just a second. 47 minutes. That was not enough time. That was not nearly enough time to evacuate anyone. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council was already watching. Their spy drones had detected the fleet days ago, but they had done nothing. Now, they sat in their great chamber and observed the attack through live feeds. 47 species, representing billions of lives, watched as they approached Earth. Counselor and of the people stood up from his seat. His blue skin was pale with anger. "We must send help," he said. "We cannot simply watch this happen." The High Speaker, an ancient being from a species so old that no one remembered their original name, shook his head slowly. "The protocols are clear. We do not interfere in conflicts between member species and non-aligned empires. They are not part of this council. We have no authority over their actions." "They are attacking a member world," and argued. "Earth is under our protection." "Earth has been a member for 3 years, another counselor said. His tone was dismissive. "They are barely more than primitives. Perhaps it is better this way. Perhaps they will simply take what they want and leave." And stared at his colleagues in disbelief. They were going to let this happen. They were going to sit in their comfortable chambers and watch millions of humans die. He sat back down and said nothing more, but he made a decision in that moment. A decision that would change everything. On Earth, the first strikes came without warning. A beam of white light fell from the sky and hit the center of New York City. The explosion was visible from space. Millions of people died in an instant. Tokyo was next, then Berlin, then Sydney. In the first hour of the attack, 20 million humans died. The ships moved with terrible efficiency, targeting population centers and military bases alike. They did not discriminate. They did not show mercy. They simply destroyed everything in their path. Admiral Carter watched the reports come in from Luna Base. Each one was worse than the last. Each one showed another city burning, another defense station destroyed, another ship torn apart by weapons. His hands had stopped shaking now. Something cold and hard had settled in his chest, something that he had not felt in a very long time. "Sir," an officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from the flagship. They're demanding our surrender." Carter looked at the screen. He saw the face of High Warlord L, the leader of the Dominion. The alien was smiling. He had the look of someone who had already won. "They want to speak with whoever is in charge," the officer continued. "They say if we surrender now, they will stop the bombardment." Carter stood up slowly. He straightened his uniform. He looked around at the officers and crew members who were watching him. They were scared. They were angry. They were waiting for him to tell them what to do. "Open a channel," he said. "Not to all human forces. Every ship, every station, every soldier. I want everyone to hear this." The communication officer's hands moved across the console. A moment later, a green light appeared, indicating that the channel was open. Carter took a deep breath. "This is Admiral Daniel Carter of the United Earth Fleet. I am speaking to every man and woman who wears our uniform. I am speaking to every civilian who is watching the sky burn. I am speaking to every human being who is wondering if this is the end." He paused. The silence was absolute. They think they know what we are. They think we are weak. They think we are primitive. They think that a few bombs and a few threats will make us fall to our knees and beg for mercy. His voice grew harder. They are wrong. They do not know what they have awakened. They do not understand what humanity becomes when our home is threatened. They attacked our world. They killed our people. They burned our cities. He looked directly into the camera. "All ships, all stations, all forces. This is not a request. This is not a suggestion. This is an order from your commanding officer." His eyes were cold now, cold and determined. "They want a war. Let's show them what that means." On the Galactic Council observation deck, Counselor and watched the transmission. He saw the look in the human admiral's eyes. He saw something that he had never seen before in all his centuries of life. He saw a species that was not afraid to die. He saw a species that would fight until the very last breath. He saw a species that the galaxy had underestimated. And for the first time in his long life, Counselor and felt something like fear. Not fear of what the humans were about to do. 72 hours had passed since the first bombs fell. The fleet hung in orbit above Earth like a dark cloud, their commanders celebrating what they believed was an easy victory. On their flagship, officers drank and laughed and talked about how quickly the humans had fallen. They had no idea what was coming. Deep beneath the frozen surface of Titan, one of Saturn's moons, Dr. Nancy was running through the final activation sequence. She was a small woman with hair and tired eyes, but her hands moved across the controls with perfect precision. She had been waiting for this moment for 12 years. "Project Prometheus is ready," she said into her communicator. "Admiral Carter, we are standing by for your order." Across the solar system, in places that no one knew existed, similar messages were being sent. Hidden bases on Europa, secret shipyards inside hollowed asteroids, research stations buried beneath the surface of Mars. Humanity had spent the last 3 years preparing for exactly this scenario. They had smiled at the Galactic Council. They had played the role of the harmless newcomers. And all the while they had been building. Admiral Carter received the reports on Luna Base. Despite the devastation on Earth, despite the millions of dead, he felt something like hope for the first time since the attack began. "What's our total strength?" he asked Commander Monroe through the video link. "More than they know, sir," she replied. "Captain Park is bringing the Shadow Fleet out of hiding. That's 47 stealth destroyers that aren't on any galactic registry. Doctor has 3 zero-point weapons ready to deploy. And General Bradley reports that ground resistance is stronger than expected." Carter nodded slowly. The Shadow Fleet. Even he had not known about those ships until 6 months ago. They were completely invisible to standard sensors. They had no idea they existed. On Earth, General Bradley was coordinating the resistance from a bunker 300 meters beneath the Rocky Mountains. The ground troops had begun landing in the major cities, expecting to find a broken and defeated population. What they found instead was something very different. In the ruins of Chicago, a group of civilians had ambushed a patrol. They had used hunting rifles and kitchen knives and anything else they could find. 12 died. The civilians lost twice that number, but they did not stop fighting. In the countryside of Texas, farmers had organized into militia units. They set traps on the roads. They poisoned water supplies. They fought from the shadows and disappeared before they could respond. In Tokyo, despite the devastation, survivors had emerged from underground shelters and begun attacking supply lines. They had no weapons, so they made their own. They had no training, so they learned. General Bradley read the reports with a grim smile. They had expected humanity to surrender. They had expected fear and despair. Instead, they found a species that simply refused to stop fighting. "They don't understand us," Bradley said to his aide. "They think war is about weapons and ships and soldiers. They don't know that for humans, war is about will, and we have more will than they can possibly imagine." In orbit, the commander was beginning to notice that something was wrong. His occupation forces were taking casualties at an unexpected rate. His supply lines were being disrupted, and his sensors were picking up strange readings at the edges of the solar system. "What is that?" he demanded, pointing at a cluster of signals near Jupiter. His sensor officer shook his head. "Unknown, Commander. They appeared approximately 3 hours ago. They don't match any ship configuration in our database." "How many?" The officer hesitated. "At least 40, possibly more. They seem to be moving toward our position, but their energy signatures keep disappearing and reappearing." The commander felt the first hint of unease. This was not supposed to happen. The humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to have only a handful of outdated ships. Where were these new vessels coming from? Aboard the UES Shadow Wolf, Captain Park watched his display with quiet satisfaction. His ship was one of 47 stealth destroyers, each one equipped with technology that the Galactic Council did not know existed. They could move through space like ghosts, appearing and disappearing at will. "All ships maintain formation," Park said calmly. "We move on Admiral Carter's signal and not before. Let them wonder. Let them worry. The fear will do half our work for us." In the great chamber of the Galactic Council, the watching species were growing increasingly confused. Their spy drones were detecting human ships in locations that should have been empty. They were seeing weapon signatures that did not match any known technology. They were watching a species that they had dismissed as primitive reveal capabilities that rivaled the oldest empires in the galaxy. Counselor and made his decision. He accessed the Council's secure database and began downloading everything they knew about military tactics, their weaknesses, their blind spots, their vulnerabilities. When he was done, he transmitted it all to Admiral Carter through a hidden channel. He was betraying the Council's neutrality. He was violating a dozen sacred protocols. He did not care. On Luna Base, Carter received the transmission. He read through the data with growing appreciation. The counselor had given them exactly what they needed. "Commander Monroe," he said, "begin coordinating with Captain Park and Doctor. I want a full tactical plan within 6 hours." "Yes, sir. What should I call it?" Carter looked out the window at the distant blue marble of Earth. Even from here, he could see the fires burning. He could see the scars that they had left on his home. "Operation Reckoning," he said, "because that's exactly what's coming." On the flagship, the commander was receiving more troubling reports. His ground forces were being slaughtered. His sensors were detecting more unknown ships every hour, and the humans had gone completely silent. That silence was the worst part. They should have been begging for mercy. They should have been trying to negotiate. Instead, there was nothing but quiet. The commander did not know it yet, but that silence was the sound of humanity preparing to show the galaxy exactly what happened when you attacked their home. The sleeping giant had awakened, and it was angry. 1 week after the attack, the occupation was falling apart. Their ground forces were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Their supply lines were in chaos, and their commanders were beginning to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. But the real nightmare was only beginning. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and gave the order that would change everything. All forces, begin Operation Reckoning. May God help us all. Across the solar system, human ships emerged from hiding. Captain Park's stealth fleet materialized behind the communication relays and destroyed them in a matter of minutes. Without their long-range communications, the forces were suddenly isolated. They could not call for help. They could not coordinate their defense. They could not even warn there about what was happening. Lieutenant Amy was sitting in the cockpit of her fighter when the order came through. She was the leader of Ghost Squadron, an elite unit of pilots who had trained for years in secret. They were the best humanity had to offer, and today they were going to prove it. "Ghost Squadron, form up on me," she said through her radio. "We're going in first. Watch each other's backs and don't let any of them escape." Her squadron launched from the hidden carrier UES Vengeance, a massive ship that had been built inside a hollowed asteroid. Commander Greg watched them go from the bridge, his face tight with tension. He had helped design this ship. He had spent 5 years of his life making sure it was ready for exactly this moment. "Launch all remaining squadrons," ordered, "and prepare the main batteries. We're about to introduce ourselves to the galaxy." The fleet detected the incoming attack too late. Squadron hit them like a thunderbolt, weaving through their defensive fire with impossible speed. Human pilots had always been known for their quick reflexes, but no one had expected this level of skill. Destroyed 3 fighters in her first pass. She could hear her squadron mates calling out their kills over the radio. 8, 12, 20. The numbers kept climbing. "They can't keep up with us," one of her pilots said, his voice filled with wonder. "They're too slow." Smiled grimly. "That's because they've never fought humans before. Keep pushing. Don't give them time to adapt." On the surface of Earth, the tide was turning just as quickly. General Bradley had coordinated a massive counterattack against the ground forces. Human soldiers, supported by armed civilians, surged out of their hiding places and overwhelmed the alien invaders. In New York, the ruins of Times Square became humans charged across the rubble with weapons in their hands and fury in their hearts. They had never seen anything like it. These people had lost everything. Their homes were destroyed. Their families were dead, and instead of breaking, they fought harder. A young soldier named Danny Cooper led his squad through the shattered streets, moving from building to building. He was only 22 years old, but he had already seen more death than anyone should see in a lifetime. "Keep moving," he shouted to his squad. "They're falling back toward the park. Don't let them regroup." He did not think about the danger. He did not think about his own survival. He only thought about pushing forward, about taking back his city, about making the pay for what they had done. In the Galactic Council chamber, the watching species had fallen silent. They stared at their screens with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The humans were not just fighting back. They were winning. And the way they were winning was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. One counselor, a being made of living crystal, spoke in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "They do not fight like any species in our records. They do not retreat. They do not surrender. They simply keep coming." Counselor and nodded slowly. "I tried to tell you. I tried to warn you about what would happen if you underestimated them, but you would not listen." "What are they?" another counselor asked, his voice trembling. And looked at the screen. He saw a human soldier pick up a fallen comrade's weapon and keep fighting despite his own wounds. He saw a pilot ram her damaged fighter into a cruiser to prevent it from escaping. He saw a species that seemed to have no concept of impossible. "They are survivors," and said quietly. "They're nearly killed them a dozen times before they ever reach space. They have been fighting for survival since the first day of their existence, and now they are fighting for their home." He paused and looked at his fellow counselors. "They are what we should all be, and they are what they should have feared." In orbit, the battle was reaching its climax. Doctor's zero-point weapons had been deployed for the first time, and the results were devastating. A single beam of energy hit a dreadnought and the massive ship simply vanished. No explosion, no debris. It was simply gone. The Admiral watched this happen and felt true fear for the first time in his life. He had served the Dominion for 60 years. He had fought in 100 battles. He had never seen a weapon like this. "All ships fall back," he ordered. "Fall back to the outer system. We need to regroup." But the humans did not let them regroup. Squadron harassed them every step of the way. Park's stealth ships appeared out of nowhere to destroy stragglers. Carrier launched wave after wave of fresh fighters. Sent a desperate message to High Warlord L. "My lord, they are not fighting like any species we have encountered. They fight like they have nothing to lose and everything to prove. We need reinforcements. We need them now." Far away on the L received the message. He read it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. His greatest admiral, the conqueror of a dozen worlds, was begging for help against a species that had only been in space for a few decades. "Send the reserve fleet," L ordered. "Every ship we have, I will lead them myself." He would not make the same mistake his admiral had made. He would crush these humans personally. But as he prepared his fleet, he could not shake the feeling that something had changed. Something fundamental. Something that could never be undone. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks after the attack, the fleet had retreated to the space near Neptune. They were battered and demoralized, but they were not defeated. And now, reinforcements were coming. High Warlord L arrived with 200 fresh warships, doubling the size of the force. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, and looked at the distant blue dot that was Earth. "Such a small planet," he said to Admiral, "such a small species, and yet they have caused you so much trouble." Lowered his head in shame. "My lord, I underestimated them. We all did. They are not what we expected." "They are primitives," L replied coldly. "They have been in space for barely a generation. I do not care what tricks they have played. Today we end this." On Luna Base, Admiral Carter watched the reinforcements arrive. The enemy fleet now numbered over 500 ships. His own force was less than half that size. "They think numbers will save them," Commander Monroe said quietly. "They still don't understand." Carter nodded. He had been waiting for this moment. They had gathered their entire available fleet in one place. They had put all their strength in a single fist. And Carter was about to show them why that was a mistake. "Open a channel to all human forces," he said. His face appeared on screens across the solar system. On ships and stations, in bunkers and command centers, every human stopped what they were doing to listen. "This is Admiral Carter. 2 weeks ago they attacked our home. They killed millions of our people. They burned our cities. They thought we would break." He paused and his eyes grew hard. "They were wrong. We did not break. We fought back. And now, for the first time in history, humanity goes to war not just to survive, but to make certain that this never happens again." He looked directly into the camera. "Today we show the galaxy what happens when you corner humanity. All ships, advance to Neptune. We finish this today." The Battle of Neptune began at exactly 1400 hours, Earth time. The human fleet moved in 3 groups, with Carter's Defiance leading the center, Vengeance on the left, and Park's stealth fleet hidden and waiting. L watched them approach with contempt. "They are outnumbered 2 to 1. They are throwing themselves against our defenses like insects against a window." "My lord," said carefully, "I advise caution. These humans have surprised us before." "They will not surprise me." The first shots were fired at extreme range. Weapons lit up the darkness of space, creating a wall of destruction that should have torn the human fleet apart. But the human ships did not fly in straight lines like other species. They dodged and weaved, moving in patterns that seemed almost random but were actually carefully coordinated. Lieutenant led Ghost's squadron into the heart of the formation. Her fighters were smaller and faster than anything they had, and she used every advantage. She destroyed a cruiser with a torpedo down its main engine port. She disabled a destroyer by taking out its sensor array. "Ghost 3 on your left," she called out. "I see him, thanks, Ghost Leader." They fought as a single unit, protecting each other, covering each other's weaknesses. This was something they could not understand. Human pilots trusted each other completely. They would die for each other without hesitation. Captain Park's stealth fleet appeared behind the lines at the worst possible moment. 47 destroyers materialized out of nothing and began launching boarding pods at the largest ships. Human commandos stormed through the enemy vessels, fighting in corridors and engine rooms and bridges. They used shotguns and grenades in their bare hands when they had to. They were larger and stronger, but the humans did not care. They kept fighting even when wounded. They kept advancing even when outnumbered. In the Galactic Council chamber, the observers watched in stunned silence. One of them, an ancient being who had seen 1,000 wars, spoke in a voice filled with awe. "They are not just fighting to survive. They are fighting to make certain this never happens again. This is not war. This is a reckoning." On the bridge of the Vengeance, Commander made his decision. His ship was badly damaged. Half his crew was dead, but he could see an opportunity that would not come again. The ammunition ship was positioned near the center of their fleet. If it was destroyed, the resulting explosion would take out dozens of enemy vessels. "All hands, this is Commander. I am ordering a full evacuation. Get to the escape pods. That is a direct order." "Sir," his first officer said, "what are you going to do?" Smiled sadly, "I'm going to finish this." He waited until his crew was clear, then pointed the Vengeance at the ammunition ship and engaged full thrust. The massive carrier accelerated through the fleet, absorbing hit after hit but never slowing down. The collision created a chain reaction that lit up the darkness of space. 43 ships were destroyed in an instant. The enemy fleet's formation shattered. Lieutenant saw her opportunity. "Ghost squadron with me, we're going for the flagship." They fought through the chaos, dodging debris and enemy fire. Lost 3 pilots on the way, but the rest made it through. They launched their boarding pods at the Destroyer of Worlds and breached the hull. El realized what was happening too late. Human soldiers were inside his ship, fighting their way toward the bridge. He drew his weapon and prepared to fight, but there were too many of them. They came through the doors like a wave, overwhelming his guards. A young human soldier, barely more than a boy, pointed a weapon at El's head. "High Warlord El, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity. You will stand trial for what you have done." El stared at the soldier in disbelief. He had conquered worlds. He had enslaved entire species. And now he was being captured by a child. "How," he whispered, "how is this possible?" The soldier smiled grimly. "You attacked Earth. That was your first mistake and your last." Across the battlefield, the fleet began to surrender. Their flagship was captured. Their warlord was in chains. Their fleet was broken. Admiral Carter watched the surrenders come in and felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction. It was done. The reckoning was complete. But the galaxy would never forget what they had seen today. 1 month after the attack, Admiral Daniel Carter walked through the great doors of the Galactic Council chamber. Behind him, 2 human soldiers escorted High Warlord El in chains. The alien warlord who had terrorized dozens of worlds now shuffled forward with his head down, broken and defeated. The chamber was silent. 47 species watched from their seats as the humans entered. These were the same beings who had observed the attack on Earth, the same beings who had debated and discussed while millions died, the same beings who had done nothing. Carter stopped in the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled counselors. He saw fear in some faces, respect in others, and in many, a deep and uncomfortable shame. "Counselors of the Galactic Council," Carter began, his voice echoing through the vast space, "I bring before you High Warlord L of the Dominion. He stands accused of unprovoked aggression against a member world. He stands accused of the murder of 37 million human beings. He will face justice." He paused and let his words sink in. "But I did not come here only to deliver a prisoner. I came here to deliver a message." The counselors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew what was coming. They had been dreading this moment since the first reports of humanity's victory reached them. 1 month ago, they attacked Earth. They destroyed our cities, they slaughtered our people, and you watched. Carter's voice grew harder. You watched, you debated, you discussed protocols and procedures while human children burned in the streets of our cities. Counselor and lowered his head. He had tried to help, but he knew that did not excuse the failures of the council as a whole. "We asked for help," Carter continued. "We begged for intervention. And what did you do? Nothing. You sat in this chamber and decided that 37 million human lives were not worth the trouble of acting." He looked at each counselor in turn. "We will remember. Humanity will never forget who stood with us in our darkest hour and who turned away. We will never forget." The High Speaker rose from his seat. "Admiral Carter, the Council regrets the loss of life on your world, but surely you must understand that we have protocols. We have rules that govern our actions. We cannot simply intervene in every conflict that arises." "You are right," Carter said. "You cannot, but we can." He stepped forward. "The Galactic Council has maintained peace for 10,000 years by avoiding conflict, by standing aside when species fight and die, by pretending that neutrality is the same as virtue." He shook his head. "That ends now." "What do you mean?" the High Speaker asked, his voice uncertain. "I mean that humanity will not play by your rules. We will not stand aside while innocent species are conquered. We will not debate and discuss while worlds burn. If the Council will not protect the weak, then we will." The counselors began murmuring among themselves. This was unprecedented. No species had ever challenged the Council's authority so directly. Counselor and stood up. "I support humanity's position. The Council has failed in its most basic duty. We claim to represent civilization, but we allowed barbarians to attack a member world without consequence. We are cowards." Other counselors began to speak up, some in agreement, some in opposition. The chamber descended into chaos. Carter waited until the noise died down, then spoke again. "We are not asking for your permission. We are telling you how things will be. Humanity will take a permanent seat on this council. We will have an equal voice in all decisions. And we will use that voice to make sure that what happened to Earth never happens to anyone else." The High Speaker looked at Carter for a long moment. He saw no anger in the human's eyes, no desire for revenge, only a cold determination that was somehow more frightening than any threat. "And if we refuse?" the High Speaker asked. Carter smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You saw what we did to the—" They had the largest military fleet in the galaxy. They are now a broken empire with no leader and no hope of recovery. Do you really want to find out what happens if you refuse? The vote was held that same day. Humanity was granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Council with full voting rights and equal standing. It was not a unanimous decision, but it did not need to be. In the weeks and months that followed, the galaxy changed. Other aggressive species that had been planning attacks on weaker neighbors quietly abandoned their plans. Trade routes that had been controlled by pirates became safe almost overnight. The mere threat of human intervention was enough to maintain peace in sectors that had known nothing but war for centuries. On Earth, the rebuilding continued. Cities rose from the ashes. Memorials were built for the dead. Children played in parks that had been craters just months before. Lieutenant Amy was promoted to commander and given her own squadron. She flew patrol missions along the border of former space, a constant reminder of what humanity had become. Captain Park's stealth fleet remained classified. Most of the galaxy did not even know it existed. That was exactly how Park wanted it. Some threats were better left invisible. Dr. Nancy continued her research on Titan. Her zero-point weapons had proven their worth, but she knew that someday humanity might face an even greater threat. She wanted to be ready. And Admiral Daniel Carter returned to Luna Base, where he had been drinking coffee when the attack began. He stood at the window and looked at Earth, now healing from its wounds. "Do you think they've learned?" Commander Monroe asked, standing beside him. "Some of them," Carter replied. "The smart ones have learned that humanity is not to be threatened. The foolish ones will need another lesson. And if another lesson is needed." Carter smiled grimly. "Then we will teach them, as many times as necessary." 10 years later, a young alien student in a classroom far across the galaxy raised her hand. "Teacher, why do the other species treat humans with such respect? They are small. They live short lives. They have only been in space for a few decades." The teacher, an old with blue skin and wise eyes, looked at his student and considered his answer carefully. "They are small," he agreed. "They are young. And yes, they live brief lives compared to many species, but never ever mistake those things for weakness." He pulled up an image of Earth on the classroom display. 30 years ago, the Dominion attacked this world. They killed millions. They thought humanity would surrender. He paused. They were wrong. The humans fought back with a fury that the galaxy had never seen. They destroyed the most powerful military force in known space. They captured a warlord who had conquered 100 worlds, and they did it in less than a month. The student's eyes were wide. What happened after? The humans joined the Galactic Council. They changed everything. They made it clear that they would protect any species that could not protect itself. The teacher looked at his students with complete seriousness. Some species fight for territory, some fight for resources. Humans fight for each other, and they fight for anyone who needs their help. He turned off the display. They attacked Earth once, just once. No one has ever made that mistake again, and no one ever will. The student nodded slowly, understanding at last why the small, short-lived humans were treated with such respect across the galaxy. They were not feared because they were powerful. They were respected because they were willing to use that power to protect others. That was what made them different. That was what made them dangerous. And that was what made them human.